I've arrived in Holland on the final part of my journey to find out more about one of the most amazing escape operations of the war. D-Day, June the 6th, 1944. The Allies invaded Normandy. Soon troops were sweeping through France and Belgium. But as the Allies advanced towards Germany's borders, they met fierce resistance. The Allies were desperate to reach Berlin before winter, so drew up a plan to capture the bridges spanning the rivers and canals on the Dutch-German border. The biggest prize was the bridge at Arnhem. Once the bridge was secure, the Allies would push across the river and punch their way into Nazi Germany. 30,000 paratroopers were dropped north of the Rhine behind enemy lines. Among them, Tony Hibbert, now 93, but then a young parachute major.
My orders were to capture Arnhem Bridge and to hold Arnhem Bridge for 48 hours.
But the plan went badly wrong. Many of the troops were dropped too far from their targets. The element of surprise was lost, and the German defences had also been underestimated. Thousands were killed and wounded. Many, like Tony, were captured.
That was my most miserable day. I was disgusted with myself and everything. That was the bottom.
Tony was determined to escape. As he was being taken by truck to a prison camp, he and a fellow prisoner jumped out.
He ran down that road there and climbed over a fence, and they shot him just when he was on top. I ran down there, zigzagging as I went, and I managed to get away.
What happened back here?
In a fit of absolute rage, the corporal just turned to our chaps and shot 6 of them in cold blood.
And this is in memory, in their memory.
That is the worst moment of the war for me.
Tony was sheltered by the Dutch resistance. Among the families protecting evaders like Tony were the Van Eycks. Their daughter, Hiltje, was 2 years old at the time.
There are 5 houses here, and 4 of those houses were people living who were in resistance.
The people here in this area that were looking after the troops were taking a hell of a risk, weren't they?
If they were caught, they really were killed. Mostly killed, or sometimes taken to camps, but mostly killed.
Why did they put their lives and their families' lives in risk?
My mother, she always said, it's normal. It's not something special.
But as the weeks passed, the situation became critical.
There were too many here, and it was too dangerous for the Dutch. There was no food anymore. So the officers and the resistance, they said, we have to make a plan.
We've got to get these guys out.
Yeah.
And this is once again where we meet Airey Neve, Colditz escapee and MI9 mastermind. Neve was in the battle zone, working to get the Allied troops trapped on the German side of the river back to safety. The plan was called Operation Pegasus.
The evaders had to make their way from houses, farmhouses, towns, churches, all around the outskirts of Arnhem, all the way down to the banks of the Rhine in one specific place, and a battle still raging around them. Pegasus was going to be a very dangerous operation.
This was the main...
Tony took me to the rendezvous point. I tried to imagine the scene here nearly 70 years ago. Over 130 men huddled in the pitch black with the river 3 miles away. And to reach it, they had to walk directly through enemy lines.
We just held on to each person by his shoulder.
Like that?
And going along in a long single line. Yeah.
Now, this field was 11 p.m. Tony and his colleagues reached open ground. The rescue point was at the riverbank just across this field, but they were surrounded by Germans. How did you get across this field, right the way down the middle there?
Well, we were ordered to start off with on our hands and knees.
Could you see the Germans over there or over here?
As we were going along, you could actually smell the smell of a German. They smell different from any other army that we've come across. And you could actually see the glow of their cigarettes.
At any point, they could have been discovered, shots would ring out, and it would all be over. It would be a prisoner of war camp or worse.
Unbelievably, the men made it to the pickup point without being spotted.
It doesn't look very far at the moment, but the water was right up to here and, and going pretty fast.
In the early hours of the morning, the rescue boats arrived from the other side of the river.
Out of the mist appeared this chap, and he said, "Are you chaps by any chance waiting for some boats?" Everyone roared with laughter.
Did they really?
And away we went.
How wonderful. The extraordinary risks taken by the Dutch resistance, combined with a brilliantly executed escape plan, had won 138 men their freedom.
They arrived cold, tired, hungry. Some of them were soaked to the skin because they'd been hanging on the side of the boats. And there waiting was Airy Neve to welcome them to safety, to welcome them to freedom.
So here we are, Tony,
Yep.
on the other side. Do you remember that feeling? What was it like?
The one thing that you lose when you haven't got it is freedom. And the moment I touched my foot on the ground on this side of the... I felt a completely different person. I decided I would never again be a prisoner of war. Freedom is worth everything.